pilots mocked American P-51s until they shredded their Messerschmitt squadrons. November 17, 1943, 14:30 hours, Jever Airfield, northwestern Germany. Major Klaus Miatusch stood in the operations room, exhaling smoke from his Eckstein cigarette. Outside, the temperature hovered at 4 degrees Celsius. His breath formed clouds even indoors. "Another massacre," he said, grinning at his wingmen. "Americans lost 68 bombers today. 68. The Luftwaffe pilots erupted in cheers. Schnapps glasses clinked. These men flew Messerschmitt Bf 109s, the backbone of German air superiority since 1937. 7 years of evolution, 7 years of dominance. Miatusch traced his finger across the map of Western Europe. "Look at this. The Americans can't protect their bombers past Aachen. Their escorts, P-47 Thunderbolts, they run out of fuel and turn back like frightened children. Then we feast." He wasn't wrong. The numbers told a brutal story. In October 1943 alone, the 8th Air Force lost 214 heavy bombers. The raid on Schweinfurt 3 weeks earlier? 60 B-17s obliterated in a single afternoon. Bomber crews called it Black Thursday. Luftwaffe pilots called it turkey shooting. The Americans were bleeding, hemorrhaging, drowning in their own ambition to bomb Germany by daylight. Miatusch crushed his cigarette into a metal ashtray. "The Americans have no answer. No fighter can escort bombers to Berlin and back. Physics won't allow it. We own the Reich's airspace above 20,000 feet." His mechanics nodded. It was mathematical certainty. The P-47 Thunderbolt had an operational radius of 230 miles with drop tanks. The P-38 Lightning, maybe 350 miles on a good day. Berlin sat 580 miles from England. Simple arithmetic. Germany was invincible. But what Major Miatusch didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 400 miles to the west, at Boxted Airfield in England, American ground crews were uncrating something different. 24 aircraft, silver fuselage, British Merlin engine, American ingenuity. They called it the P-51 Mustang. And in 36 days, everything Klaus Miatusch believed about air superiority would become ash. December 1st, 1943, 0530 hours, RAF Boxted, Essex, England. Lieutenant Charles Chuck Yeager couldn't feel his fingers. The pre-dawn air bit through his leather gloves as he walked toward the flight line. Temperature, -2 degrees Celsius. His breath crystallized instantly. 22 years old. West Virginia drawl. Barely 6 months of combat experience. He stopped in front of his new aircraft. The P-51B sat there, like a sculpture of aluminum and rivets. 37 feet of wingspan. Bubble canopy. 4.50 caliber machine guns in each wing. Painted olive drab with invasion stripes. "She's a beaut, ain't she?" his crew chief said. Yeager ran his hand along the wing. Cold metal. Smooth. No blemishes. "Looks fragile," Yeager muttered. "Don't let looks fool you, Lieutenant. That Packard Merlin 1657 engine, 1,200 horsepower. She'll hit 440 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Yeager climbed the wing and peered into the cockpit. Cramped, smelled of hydraulic fluid and fresh paint. The instrument panel looked like a jeweler's nightmare. Dozens of dials, switches, gauges. "What's the range?" The crew chief grinned. With 2 75-gallon drop tanks, about 1,900 miles total. Jaeger did the math in his head. That meant Berlin. That meant deep into Germany. That meant places American fighters had never been. That can't be right. Oh, it's right. Fuel efficiency like nothing we've ever built. The Brits gave us their Merlin engine. We gave them the airframe. This bird cruises at 325 miles per hour, burning only 65 gallons per hour. A P-47 guzzles fuel like a drunk sailor. Around them, 23 other P-51Bs stood in neat rows. The 354th Fighter Group, nicknamed the Pioneers. They'd been training on these aircraft for exactly 11 days. 11 days to master a new fighter. 11 days before combat. Most pilots didn't trust the Mustang yet. It looked too elegant, too refined, like a racehorse among draft horses. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a tank. 7 tons of armor and brute force. The P-51 weighed half that. It seemed delicate, vulnerable. "Germans are going to eat these things alive," one pilot muttered during breakfast. "We need armor, not speed." But the mission briefing at 0600 hours changed everything. Lieutenant Colonel Donald Blakesley, legendary RAF Eagle Squadron veteran, now leading American fighters, stood at the front of the operations room. Behind him, a map showing a bomber route to Amiens, France. Red line from England, deep into occupied territory. "Gentlemen, today we escort B-17s to target. We stay with them the entire mission. No turning back at the German border. We go all the way." Silence. Someone coughed. "Sir," a captain raised his hand, "that's 490 miles round trip. We've never had the Mustang," Blakesley interrupted. "This aircraft changes everything. Drop your external tanks when you engage. Fight on internal fuel. You'll have enough to get home." Jaeger studied the map. The route crossed the Channel, penetrated German airspace, escorted bombers through flak fields, then returned. His P-47 would have sputtered out over the French coast. The P-51 could do it. Maybe. At 0742 hours, engines roared to life. The Packard Merlin sounded different than the Pratt Whitney Radial. Smoother, higher pitched, almost melodic. Jaeger ran through his checklist. Fuel mixture, rich. Propeller pitch, full forward. Coolant temperature, rising normally. Oil pressure, 75 psi, everything green. Behind him, 23 other Mustangs revved their engines. The sound echoed across the airfield like a mechanical symphony. Ground crews gave thumbs-up signals. Tower cleared them for takeoff. Jaeger advanced the throttle. The P-51B surged forward. Light, responsive, like the aircraft wanted to fly. At 120 miles per hour, he pulled back on the stick. Liftoff. The Mustang climbed eagerly. Jaeger retracted the landing gear. The aircraft accelerated effortlessly. No wallowing, no fighting for altitude. Within minutes, they reached 15,000 feet. "Red Leader, this is Red 5, Jaeger radioed. "These birds climb like scared cats." "Maintain radio discipline, Red 5. "Yes, sir. Scared cats, sir." The formation crossed the English Channel at 22,000 feet. Sunlight reflected off the white cliffs of Dover. Below, the dark water churned. Dozens of P-51s formed a protective screen around the bomber stream. 187 B-17 flying fortresses droning toward France. This was it. The Americans were bringing the fight deeper than ever before. Jaeger scanned the sky. No enemy fighters yet, just blue infinity and contrails. His oxygen mask hissed with each breath. The cockpit temperature dropped to minus 15 degrees Celsius at altitude. Ice formed on the canopy edges. Then the radio crackled. "Bandits! 12 o'clock high. BF-109S." Yeager's heart hammered. He spotted them, 6 gray fighters diving from the sun. The Messerschmitts looked aggressive, predatory. Their Daimler-Benz engines screamed as they descended. The German pilots had done this dance 1,000 times. Attack the bombers, ignore the escorts, they'll turn back anyway. But this time, the escorts didn't turn back. Blakesley's voice cut through the radio. "Drop tanks! Engage!" 24. P-51s punched their external fuel tanks. The silver cylinders tumbled away, glittering in the sunlight. Yeager shoved the throttle to maximum power. The Merlin engine roared. The Mustang leaped forward, acceleration that no P-47 could match. Within seconds, Yeager closed the distance to the leading BF-109. The German pilot didn't see him. Rookie mistake. Yeager aligned his gun sight. The Messerschmitt filled his canopy. 300 yards, 200 yards. He squeezed the trigger. 8.50 caliber machine guns erupted. Tracers arced through the air like angry fireflies. The rounds stitched across the BF-109's fuselage. Smoke. Fire. The German fighter rolled inverted and spiraled downward, trailing black smoke. Yeager's first elimination in a P-51 Mustang. He didn't have time to celebrate. Another BF-109 crossed his nose. He turned hard. The Mustang responded instantly, like his thoughts controlled the aircraft directly. No lag. No resistance. The dogfight lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, the Luftwaffe scattered like startled birds. 3 Messerschmitts destroyed. 0 P-51s lost. As they escorted the bombers home, Yeager realized something profound. The P-47 was a brawler. Tough, brutal, effective. The P-51 was a scalpel. Precise, fast, lethal. And the Germans had no idea what was coming. The secret wasn't just the Merlin engine. Everyone focuses on the British power plant, the Rolls-Royce Merlin 1650, that transformed the Mustang from mediocre to magnificent. And yes, that engine mattered. Its 2-stage supercharger gave the P-51 exceptional high-altitude performance. At 30,000 feet, where bombers cruised and German interceptors prowled, the Mustang dominated. But the real breakthrough was something else. Something the Germans completely overlooked. Fuel efficiency. Boring, right? Not as sexy as horsepower or armor or guns. But in aerial warfare, fuel is oxygen. Without it, you're a paperweight at 25,000 feet. Here's what made the P-51 revolutionary. What's it? The Mustang's internal fuel capacity was 269 gallons spread across 5 tanks. 2 main wing tanks, 92 gallons each, 2 auxiliary wing tanks, 42 gallons each, and 1 fuselage tank, 85 gallons behind the pilot. Add 2 external 108-gallon drop tanks, and total fuel capacity reached 485 gallons. But capacity meant nothing without efficiency. The P-51B consumed approximately 65 gallons per hour at optimal cruise settings, 325 miles per hour at 10,000 feet. Compare that to the P-47 Thunderbolt, which burned 100-plus gallons per hour at similar speeds. The P-38 Lightning, even worse with its twin engines. Do the math. P-51 with 485 gallons, 7.5 hours endurance. Operational range with reserves 900-plus miles. Berlin round trip from England 1,160 miles. the Mustang could escort bombers to Berlin and still have fuel to dogfight for 30 minutes over the target. The Luftwaffe had built their entire defensive strategy on one assumption: American escorts would turn back. They'd done the calculations. Physics didn't lie. No single-engine fighter could reach Berlin. Except the Americans just rewrote the equation. January 11th, 1944. 13:15 hours. Luftwaffe High Command, Berlin. Major General Adolf Galland, General of Fighters, legendary ace with 104 victories, studied the intelligence report. "This can't be accurate," he said. His adjutant shook his head. "3 separate engagements confirm it, sir. American fighters over Halberstadt. That's 200 miles inside Germany." Galland lit a cigar. The smoke curled toward the ceiling of his office. "A 38S? "No, sir. Single-engine fighters. Witnesses described them as sleek, silver, extremely fast." Galland flipped through the reconnaissance photos. Grainy images showed silhouettes, long fuselage, bubble canopy, liquid-cooled engine with ventral radiator scoop. "What are they?" "Americans call them Mustangs, sir. P-51s." Galland had heard rumors. The British used early Mustangs for low-altitude reconnaissance. Decent aircraft. Nothing special. Certainly not a strategic threat. But these photos showed something different. These Mustangs flew at 28,000 feet. Bomber escort altitude, hundreds of miles from their bases. "How?" Galland demanded. Nobody had an answer. The Germans assumed fuel limitations. Their own Bf-109 G6 fighters had an operational radius of about 350 miles with drop tanks, barely enough to defend the Reich's borders. The Focke-Wulf for the W-190 was similar. If American fighters could penetrate deep into Germany, the entire defensive doctrine collapsed. Galland crushed his cigar into an ashtray. "Get me performance data on this P-51. I want engine specifications, fuel capacity, speed, climb rate, everything." "Yes, sir." But intelligence gathering takes time, and the Americans weren't waiting. February the 20th, 1944. 0800 hours. Over Brunswick, Germany. The Americans called it Big Week. 6 consecutive days of massive bomber raids targeting German aircraft production facilities, thousands of bombers, hundreds of escorts. And now, the P-51 Mustang joined the battle in force. Lieutenant Urban Ben Drew flew with the 375th Fighter Squadron, 361st Fighter Group. His Mustang, nicknamed Detroit Miss, carried the new K-14 gyroscopic gun sight. Computing sight. Calculated lead automatically. At 0823 hours, Drew spotted them. 12 Bf-109s forming up to attack the bomber stream. Bandits, 3 o'clock level. Drew's flight of 4 P-51s rolled into attack position. The Germans still hadn't adapted their tactics. They focused on bombers, treating escorts like annoying mosquitoes that would soon disappear. Fatal mistake. Drew closed to 400 yards. The K-14 gun sight automatically adjusted for deflection angle, airspeed, and target movement. He centered the reticle on the trailing Bf-109. Fired. The Messerschmitt exploded. Not just smoke, complete structural failure. The wings separated from the fuselage. Debris tumbled through the air like confetti. Drew didn't celebrate. There were 11 more. The dogfight lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, German losses: 7 Bf-109s destroyed. American losses: 0 P-51s. This pattern repeated across German skies. The Luftwaffe expected American escorts to turn back. Instead, they kept coming. Berlin, Munich, Vienna. Cities that had been untouchable were now within range. But the hidden advantage went deeper. The Germans didn't realize the Americans were deliberately targeting Luftwaffe training bases. In traditional combat doctrine, you attack military-industrial targets, factories, refineries, transportation hubs. But American strategists recognized something clever. Germany was running out of experienced pilots. By early 1944, Luftwaffe training programs were collapsing. Fuel shortages forced training hours to drop from 250 hours to 160 hours, then to 110 hours by mid-1944. Meanwhile, American and British pilots received 300-plus hours of training. The Americans exploited this ruthlessly. P-51 pilots began strafing German airfields, not just destroying aircraft on the ground, but specifically targeting training schools. Freshly minted Luftwaffe pilots with barely 100 hours experience faced American veterans with 500-plus hours in highly advanced fighters. It was slaughter. March 1944. Statistics tell the story. Luftwaffe pilot losses: 20% of total strength per month. Replacement pilots: 60% eliminated in first 5 combat missions. Experienced pilots: 50-plus missions. Fewer than 15% by April 1944. The Germans were fighting a war of attrition they couldn't win. And they still didn't understand why. Captain Hans Hartigs, Bf 109 pilot with 38 victories, wrote in his diary, February 24th, 1944. These new American fighters are different. They don't leave. We climb to attack bombers, and they're there. We dive away and they follow. We try to disengage and they catch us. What kind of range do these aircraft have? How is this possible? The diary was found in his crashed Messerschmitt 3 days later. Hartigs didn't survive the encounter with a P-51 over Schweinfurt. The Luftwaffe was learning, but learning too late. By the time German intelligence compiled accurate performance data on the P-51 Mustang, the aircraft was already everywhere, an aluminum ghost haunting every corner of the Third Reich's airspace. And the Germans were about to discover that the worst was yet to come. The turning point, March 6, 1944, 11:42 hours, 25,000 feet above Berlin. This was the moment everything changed. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, veteran Luftwaffe ace, with 33 victories, couldn't believe his eyes. Impossible. He breathed into his oxygen mask. Below him, 730 American B-17 and B-24 bombers droned toward Berlin in formation. Heavy bombers, strategic bombers, the same aircraft he'd been hunting for 2 years. But that wasn't the shocking part. Above the bombers, beside the bombers, in front of the bombers, everywhere, American single-engine fighters swarmed. Dozens of them, maybe 100. Silver specks reflecting sunlight. Orphy, P-51 Mustangs over Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. Knoke keyed his radio. All units, this is Red Leader. Confirm what I'm seeing. Are those really American escorts over Berlin? Confirmed, Red Leader. P-51s. At least 175 of them. The temperature at altitude was minus 40 degrees Celsius, but Knoke felt ice in his veins for a different reason. Berlin was 580 miles from England. No single-engine fighter could reach Berlin. Yet, here they were. The psychological impact was devastating. For 2 years, German civilians and military personnel believed Berlin was beyond Allied fighter range. The city was safe, protected by distance and physics. That illusion shattered in 11 minutes of savage aerial combat. Noak's formation of 12 Bf-109Gs attempted a standard intercept pattern: dive from above, attack the bomber formation, climb away before escorts could react. But the P-51s didn't react like other escorts. They anticipated. As Canucks flight began their dive, 4 Mustangs rolled over and dove with them, matching their speed, matching their angle, staying glued to their tails like persistent shadows. "Brake! Brake!" Noke screamed. Too late. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Eagleston, leading the escort group, had positioned his P-51s perfectly. As German fighters committed to their attack, American Mustangs were already there, faster, higher, more aggressive. The ensuing dogfight was chaos. Noak broke left. A P-51 followed. He tried a split S, rolling inverted and pulling through to reverse direction. The Mustang matched him. He shoved the throttle to emergency power, activating the MW-50 methanol water injection system for short burst of additional horsepower. His Bf-109 accelerated, 420 miles per hour, 435 miles per hour, 450 miles per hour. The P-51 kept pace. Noak's advantage was climbing ability. The Bf-109 could outclimb most Allied fighters. He pulled back hard, trading speed for altitude. His vision narrowed. G-forces pressed him into his seat. 4 Gs, 5 Gs. The altimeter spun. 26,000 feet, 27,000 feet, 28,000 feet. He looked back. The P-51 was still there, still closing. At 29,000 feet, Canucks' engine began losing power. His supercharger couldn't maintain performance. The Merlin-powered Mustang, with its 2-stage supercharger, actually performed better at high altitude. The American pilot, whoever he was, fired a 2-second burst. Tracers flashed past Canucks' canopy. He felt impacts, solid thuds, as .50 caliber rounds punched through his aircraft's skin. Warning lights illuminated. Coolant temperature rising. Oil pressure dropping. Noak had seconds to decide. Bail out or try to reach friendly territory. He chose survival. He rolled his crippled Messerschmitt and dove away, bleeding airspeed and altitude. Smoke poured from his engine cowling. The American didn't pursue. His flight had already moved on to other targets. Noka nursed his damaged fighter to an emergency landing at Stendal Airfield, 80 miles northwest of Berlin. He climbed out on shaking legs. Ground crew surrounded him. "Hauptmann, are you hurt?" Noak pulled off his oxygen mask. His hands trembled, not from injury, but from realization. "They were over Berlin," he said quietly. "American fighters, over Berlin." The mechanics exchanged glances. Nobody spoke. In that moment, every German who understood aerial warfare grasped the truth. If American fighters could reach Berlin, nowhere in Germany was safe. Not factories, not airfields, not training schools, not anywhere. The March 6th mission results. American side, bombers dispatched, 730. Bombers lost, 69. Fighters dispatched, 801, including 175 P-51s. Fighters lost, 11. German side, fighters engaged, approximately 350. Fighters destroyed in combat, 79. Fighters damaged beyond repair, 67. Pilots killed, 63. Pilots wounded, 28. For the Luftwaffe, these numbers were catastrophic. Germany couldn't replace 79 fighters and 63 experienced pilots in a single day. Aircraft production could continue. Factories still operated. But pilot training took months. Experienced pilots took years. And the Americans weren't done. Over the next 6 weeks, the pattern repeated with brutal consistency. March 8th, P-51s escort bombers to Berlin again. 37 German fighters lost. March 15th, Mustangs strafe airfields across central Germany. 89 aircraft destroyed on ground. March 22nd, deep penetration raid to Munich. P-51s engaged throughout. 43 Luftwaffe fighters eliminated. April 8th, Bremen raid. 57 German aircraft destroyed. April 11th, first escort mission to Poland. The Luftwaffe loses 76 fighters. Every mission pushed deeper. Every mission lasted longer. The P-51's range advantage became a strategic hammer, pulverizing German fighter strength through sustained, unrelenting pressure. Major General Adolf Galland met with Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall and commander of the Luftwaffe, on April 24, 1944. The conversation was grim. "We're losing 25% of our fighter pilots every month," Galland reported. "At this rate, we have 6 months before total collapse." Göring, infamous for his detachment from reality, waved dismissively. "Produce more fighters, train more pilots." "With what fuel?" Galland shot back. "We've cut training hours to 110. Our new pilots face American veterans with triple the experience, flying superior aircraft. It's not sustainable. And our pilots must fight harder." Galland stared at his superior. The man who once promised to defend Germany with an iron fist now offered empty platitudes. "The Americans can escort bombers anywhere," Galland said slowly. "Berlin, Munich, Vienna, Ploesti, anywhere. The P-51 has changed everything." Göring's face reddened. One aircraft cannot decide a war. But Galland knew better. In his memoirs, written years later, Galland would state, "The day we saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." By May 1944, Luftwaffe fighter pilot losses averaged 20 to 25% per month. To put that in perspective, if 1,000 pilots began January 1944, only 317 would survive until December, assuming no increase in loss rates. But rates were increasing. The statistics were merciless. In 1943, average Luftwaffe pilot survival after first combat mission, 18 months. In early 1944, 9 months. By mid-1944, 4 months. By late 1944, 6 weeks. Young German pilots arrived at operational squadrons with barely 100 hours of flight time. They faced American pilots with 400-plus hours, often including 50-plus combat missions. And they flew against the P-51 Mustang, an aircraft superior in speed, range, altitude performance, and visibility. Truant, the outcome was predictable. One captured Luftwaffe pilot, interrogated in May 1944, told his American captors, "We used to worry about bombers, heavy bombers dropping thousands of tons of explosives. That was terrifying. But we could fight bombers. We had tactics. We had courage. But these silver fighters, your Mustangs, they're everywhere. You take off and they're there. You land and they strafe your airfield. You're over your own territory and suddenly, there they are, hundreds of miles from their base. How do you fight something that's always there? How do you defend against an enemy who can reach anywhere, anytime? You can't. You simply can't." Summer 1944. The numbers told a story of systematic annihilation. Between March and August 1944, 5 months, the Luftwaffe fighter force effectively ceased to exist as a coherent defensive organization. Consider the brutal arithmetic. Luftwaffe fighter losses, March-August 1944. March, 56% of available fighters destroyed. April, 43% of available fighters destroyed. May, 50% of available fighters destroyed. Or June, 25% of available fighters destroyed. D-Day dispersed forces. July, 30% of available fighters destroyed. August, 49% of available fighters destroyed. But aircraft could be replaced. Pilots could not. Luftwaffe pilot losses. March-August 1944. Pilots killed or missing, 2,262. Pilots wounded out of service, 1,117. Total casualties, 3,379 pilots in 6 months. Germany graduated approximately 2,000 new fighter pilots during this period. They couldn't keep pace with losses. The veteran pilot cadre, the backbone of any air force, was bleeding out. And the P-51 Mustang was the scalpel making the cuts. June 6, 1944. D-Day, Normandy, France. When Allied forces stormed the beaches at dawn, the Luftwaffe was conspicuously absent. German fighters made only 319 sorties on D-Day, against over 14,000 Allied sorties. Why? The Luftwaffe had been gutted over the previous 4 months. What remained was scattered, understrength, poorly trained, and desperately short on fuel. P-51 Mustangs flew top cover over the invasion beaches. They encountered minimal resistance. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, later wrote, "The success of D-Day depended on air supremacy. We needed to bomb German defenses, disrupt their communications, prevent reinforcements. The heavy bombers did this, but the heavy bombers could only operate because the P-51 Mustang had destroyed the Luftwaffe fighter force in the spring of 1944. Without that, D-Day might have failed." Strong words, but statistically accurate. Let me tell you about one specific pilot. His story captures the transition from German confidence to catastrophic defeat. Oberleutnant Franz Steigler. 28 years old, veteran of the North African Campaign. 27 confirmed victories. Experienced, skilled, respected. In December 1943, Steigler famously escorted a crippled B-17 bomber out of German airspace instead of destroying it, an act of chivalry that would later make him legendary. But by summer 1944, chivalry was a luxury nobody could afford. July 7, 1944. Steigler scrambled to intercept a bomber formation near Leipzig. His Bf-109 G14 was in good condition, recently serviced, full ammunition, adequate fuel. At 24,000 feet, he spotted the bombers. He also spotted 15 P-51 Mustangs escorting them. Steigler had learned to respect the Mustang. This wasn't the turkey shoot of 1943. These American pilots knew what they were doing, and their aircraft outperformed his in every category except instantaneous turn rate. Still, he had a job to do. Steigler dove toward the bomber formation, intending a high-speed slashing attack. Fire a burst. Keep moving. Don't get tangled up with escorts. He never got close. 2 P-51s intercepted him mid-dive. How they got there so fast, he never understood. One broke left, one broke right, squeezing him into a vertical reversal. Steigler pulled hard. His vision grayed. 6 Gs, 7 Gs. His Bf-109 shuddered but held together. He looked for the Mustangs. They were gone. For 3 seconds, he thought he'd escaped. Then tracers ripped past his canopy from below. One of the P-51s had cut throttle, dropped below him, and pulled lead for a deflection shot. Perfect gunnery. Perfect positioning. Stigler felt impacts. His engine coughed. Oil pressure dropped to zero. He had maybe 90 seconds before catastrophic failure. Stigler radioed, "Red 3 breaking off, engine damage, making emergency landing." Nobody responded. The radio was dead, shot away in the attack. He glided his dying Messerschmitt toward an auxiliary airfield near Torgau. The engine seized completely at 800 feet altitude. He dead-sticked it onto the grass runway, wheels up, sliding to a stop in a shower of dirt and sparks. Stigler climbed out, shaking. He'd been flying combat operations for nearly 3 years, survived North Africa, survived the Mediterranean, survived countless dogfights. But this felt different. The Americans weren't lucky. They weren't amateurs stumbling into success. They were better. The kill-loss ratio confirmed it. P-51 Mustang versus German fighters, 1944 statistics. January-March, 2.8 to 1, P-51 favor. April-June, 3.9 to 1. July-September, 4.6 to 1. October-December, 5.2 to 1. By September 1944, for every P-51 lost in combat, American pilots destroyed an average of 4.6 German aircraft. Those numbers were unsustainable. But the reckoning went beyond statistics. The P-51's strategic impact cascaded through German war production. Effect 1. Escort protection. Heavy bombers could now strike targets deep in Germany with acceptable losses. Pre-Mustang raids saw 8 to 12% bomber loss rates. Post-Mustang, 2 to 4%. This meant American bombers could systematically destroy German industrial capacity. Oil refineries, aircraft factories, ball-bearing plants, without being stopped. Effect 2. Offensive sweeps. P-51s didn't just escort. They went hunting. American doctrine evolved. Seek and destroy. Mustang groups would leave the bomber stream, search for German fighters, and engage them before they could threaten bombers. This forced the Luftwaffe into a brutal dilemma: intercept bombers and get ambushed by P-51s, or stay on the ground and let bombers destroy infrastructure unchallenged. Both options were losing propositions. Effect 3. Airfield attacks. The P-51's range allowed strafing missions deep into Germany. After escorting bombers, Mustang pilots would descend to low altitude and attack airfields, locomotives, supply convoys, anything that moved. German aircraft losses on the ground exceeded combat losses by June 1944. Trainee pilots were shot down during their first solo flights. Airfields became death traps. Effect 4. Psychological collapse. Once, German pilots knew they were outmatched. They knew their training was inadequate. They knew their replacements would likely die within weeks. Morale disintegrated. Veteran pilot Werner Mulders, survived until October 1944, wrote, "We're fighting a defensive war with offensive aircraft against an enemy flying defensive aircraft offensively. The Americans use fighters to dominate airspace. We use fighters to intercept bombers. They win by making us irrelevant." August 17, 1944, 1 year after the disastrous Schweinfurt raid. American heavy bombers returned to Schweinfurt, the ball-bearing plants that had cost them 60 bombers the previous year. This time, 1,155 bombers attacked with 967 fighter escorts, including 548 P-51 Mustangs. German losses. Fighters destroyed in combat, 78. Fighters destroyed on ground, strafing, 107. Pilots killed, 62. Bombers lost, 14. the Americans traded 14 bombers and 7 fighters for 185 German aircraft and 62 irreplaceable pilots. This was the reckoning. This was what air superiority looked like when one side had the P-51 Mustang and the other didn't. By the end of August 1944, the Luftwaffe fighter force averaged 1,500 operational aircraft across all fronts. In January 1944, they'd fielded 2,400. But operational strength meant nothing without fuel and pilots. Fuel production collapsed under Allied bombing, down 80% by September 1944. Pilot quality deteriorated catastrophically. Average training hours fell to 100 by October 1944, compared to 300 plus for Allied pilots. The Luftwaffe was technically still flying, but it was a ghost force, hollowed out, ineffective, waiting for the end. December 18, 1944. Eagle's Nest, Berchtesgaden. Adolf Hitler convened his military commanders. The topic, the Ardennes Offensive, soon to be known as the Battle of the Bulge. Will the Luftwaffe support the offensive? Hitler demanded. Field Marshal Göring hesitated. Weather permitting, yes. We'll mass fighters for ground support. How many? Perhaps 800 sorties on the first day. Hitler exploded. 800? In 1940, we flew 2,000 sorties per day. What happened? Nobody answered. What happened was the P-51 Mustang. The Battle of the Bulge proved the final test. When weather cleared on December 23rd, allowing air operations, the Americans launched 11,000 plus sorties in 48 hours. The Luftwaffe managed 600 total. P-51 Mustangs dominated the battlefield, attacking German columns, rail lines, supply depots, airfields, anything that moved. The offensive collapsed not because of ground forces, but because German logistics couldn't function under complete Allied air supremacy. Air supremacy achieved, maintained, and exploited by the P-51 Mustang. Final statistics tell the story. P-51 Mustang combat record, World War II. Total produced 15,686 aircraft. Air-to-air victories, 4,950 enemy aircraft destroyed. Ground victories, 4,131 enemy aircraft destroyed, strafing. Total eliminations, 9,081 enemy aircraft. No other Allied fighter came close to this record. But the legacy extends beyond numbers. Chuck Yeager, who opened this story flying his first P-51 mission in December 1943, finished the war as an ace with 11.5 victories, all in the Mustang. He later wrote, "The P-51 wasn't just a fighter. It was the fighter, fast enough to catch anything, maneuverable enough to outfight anything, enough range to go anywhere, perfect visibility, reliable engine. It was the complete package." When I climbed into a Mustang, I felt like I could take on the whole Luftwaffe. Sometimes I did. On February 13, 1945, Yeager claimed his final victory, a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. Even Germany's most advanced technology couldn't overcome American numbers, American training, and American Mustangs. Adolf Galland, the German general who realized too late what the P-51 meant, survived the war. In 1956, he wrote his memoirs, The First and the Last. In it, he stated, "The P-51 Mustang was the most effective fighter aircraft of the Second World War. Not the most advanced. That was the Me-262 jet. Not the most heavily armed. That was various German and American designs, but the most effective. It combined range, performance, reliability, and availability in proportions that changed the fundamental nature of aerial warfare. Before the Mustang, fighters defended territory. After the Mustang, fighters controlled territory. When I saw P-51s over Berlin in March 1944, I knew Germany had lost the air war. It took another year for the ground war to catch up. But the outcome was decided that day. The legacy ripples through history. Modern air doctrine, offensive fighter sweeps, deep escort missions, multi-role capability, traces directly to P-51 operations in 1944 to 45. The F-15 Eagle, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, the F-22 Raptor. These aircraft embody the same philosophy: dominate the enemy's airspace through superior performance, superior range, and superior training. The P-51 Mustang wrote that doctrine in blood over German skies. Major Klaus Mitusch, the confident pilot who opened this story declaring American fighters would never reach Berlin, never saw the P-51's impact. He was shot down on September 18, 1944, during a dogfight near Osnabrück. His victor, a P-51 Mustang from the 357th Fighter Group. Mitusch ejected successfully, but died from injuries 3 days later. His final words to interrogators: "I've been flying since 1939, 5 years, hundreds of missions. I watched us conquer Europe. I watched us rule the skies. And then those silver fighters came, those Mustangs, and everything fell apart. We couldn't outrun them, couldn't outfight them, couldn't escape them. Tell the Americans they built the perfect fighter, and we paid for every mistake we made." Today, approximately 175 P-51 Mustangs remain airworthy worldwide. They appear at air shows, museums, and private collections, gleaming aluminum reminders of when American engineering and British power plants combined to create something extraordinary. When you see a Mustang fly, that distinctive sound of the Merlin engine, the graceful lines slicing through air, remember what it represented. Not just a fighter aircraft, not just a machine, but a weapon that ended an empire's control of its own skies. The Germans mocked the P-51 Mustang when it first appeared. Too light, too elegant, too unproven. Then it arrived over Berlin, and the mocking stopped. And the Messerschmitts fell. And the war in the air ended, not with a negotiation, but with absolute, unquestionable, devastating American air supremacy. Built one Mustang at a time, flown by men who refused to turn back. Proven over the burning wrecks of 9,081 German aircraft. The P-51 Mustang didn't just win battles. It won the sky itself.